Alrighty. So are you good to get started?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. So, hi everyone. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Risk 360 and HITRUST. I'm Matt Dadel. I'm one of the speakers for today's session. We'll be covering what we call Map Once, Comply to Many. So we'll talk about how to use HITRUST to really streamline your compliance and help you with third-party risk management across all aspects of the business. Got some experts on the call today. So to introduce ourselves, I'll kick it off. So I'm Matt Dadel. I'm a member of HITRUST. I've been here for about 8 years. And I used to be a HITRUST assessor. I used to do these assessments before I joined the team. My role now is I help with education and getting the word out to our assessors and to our customers around what's the latest, greatest with HITRUST, how are our programs working, and to make sure we're evolving and adapting to your needs. So looking forward to presenting to you all today. And I'll pass the microphone over to you, Sor.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see everyone. Thank you for your time. My name is Sawyer Miller. I'm the Director of Advisory and Assurance at Risk 360. And sort of the perspective I'll be bringing today is from kind of the advisory and implementation side of things. We are also HITRUST assessors, so we collaborate closely with HITRUST with our mutual clients. But we also work with a ton of other frameworks, and this idea of harmonization. How can you create sort of a backbone that you can collect things once and apply it in many ways across your compliance landscape? I've got a lot of in the field examples and thoughts around that stuff. So I'm looking forward to the collaborative discussion.
Absolutely.
All right. So we like to always start with the why, right? We want to understand, like, why is this a problem, or why should we care about this as a problem? The problem being harmonization and the need for it. A lot of companies are trying to do more with less in compliance, and they are running somewhat fragmented programs. They may have a PCI program over here and maybe a HITRUST program over here, and then somewhere in the middle is a SOC 2 or an ISO 27001 program. And what we've seen is that many companies understand the need for what they're facing. They understand that this complexity and sometimes ambiguity and disorganization causes inefficiencies, but they're not aware of the different approaches, because this isn't something you see a ton of best practices around yet. I think we will see more and more as the years go on, and more companies are taking this approach. But really, the goal here is to help you guys see why this is something worth investing time and resources into. And that gets to the next slide, which is sort of setting the scene. We see different levels of maturity, right? And it makes perfect sense, because a company starts, they maybe acquire some customers, prove out a market, create an MVP product. But as they grow and scale, typically they're moving upwards with the client profile they're going after. And they begin getting asked for all kinds of compliance things. So if you're handling data, information, then most likely at some point you're going to be asked about information security. Specifically, if you're handling healthcare data, that's where there's an even more specific subset, and that's the niche I know HITRUST is focused on. So the sort of levels we see are, the first level is really just ad hoc responsive. It's, you probably have a person, maybe two, that are wearing many hats, and they kind of just respond to those questionnaires that come in and help close the deals. That typically morphs into more of a foundational program, where you're actually trying to lay the groundwork to repeat tasks in a predictable fashion. The goal there is to sometimes mitigate risk, but a lot of times it's still to just enable sales, just with more efficiency and predictability. But once you get into multi-framework, let's say, your first client asked you for a SOC 2, now you've got an awesome opportunity in the healthcare vertical, and now you're being asked for HITRUST. How do you merge those together? That's where we see companies beginning to lean forward in this sort of L3, L4 stage, where they become a lot more proactive. They begin to understand how they can anticipate the needs of the market. And as they move to this L4, they actually build what we refer to as strategic resilience. They create ways to ingest new requirements without rocking the boat of their existing program too much. And that's sort of the sweet spot for these, think multi-framework enterprise clients. You've got, 4, 5, 6 products, maybe products or companies through acquisition, maybe previously disparate programs now needing to operate and respond to a single audit cycle. That's sort of that L4 stage that we see companies at. And what we've seen in this multi-framework bucket we've highlighted here is a really big need for understanding how these different frameworks really relate at a fundamental level. And that's hard because a lot of us in the industry, maybe you came up in PCI, now you're being thrown healthcare requirements. That's different, right? It's a lot of the same concepts, but it's applied with different nuance and specificity. Um, and so that sort of gets into the next slide that Matt will take you through, which is the complexity factors we see.
Absolutely. So here with the complexity factors, there's a lot of decision making and strategy that goes in place when deciding what should our IT audit of choice be, which assessments do we need to have performed, whether it's on an annual basis or more commonly to meet objectives of our business. And some of the places companies will start is what's required. What are the laws and regulations driving our assessment needs? Do we house certain information, like we mentioned, healthcare, HITRUST and healthcare are very commonly attached at the hip. We serve a ton of healthcare clients. If you have healthcare data, if you have any PHI in your system, you need to be HIPAA compliant. If you're in the US or if you're in Canada, you need to be HIPAA compliant. So what assessment or what process are you doing to manage compliance with those regulations? And if they change, are you going to be aware? Can you adapt? Can you adjust in a timely manner? Similarly, what are the best practices in the industry? What are my peers doing? What are the leaders in the industry doing from an assessment and cybersecurity compliance standpoint? If they're doing things like ISO or NIST or SOC 2 or HITRUST, should I be doing that? These are questions businesses will ask and compare with. You also look at things like expansion goals. Where do I want to expand my business? Do I want to take my technology platform into new industries? Do I want to sell overseas? Do I want to work in Europe or Asia? If I'm working in Europe, do I have to be GDPR compliant? If I'm working in the US, do I have to worry about this California privacy law, or do I need to be HIPAA compliant? These are different challenges that you will face as a business as you begin expansion and you want to target new organizations. And oftentimes I've seen this become a roadblock for organizations. They cannot sell in a certain industry or in a certain region until they demonstrate they have the right security and compliance measures to attest on that. So this is something, it's a complexity factor organizations are looking at. There's also operational constraints. Compliance takes time, compliance takes effort, and you have to research it, monitor it, maintain it, and consistently make updates when relevant. If you incorporate new technology, you have to write new policies, get new things put in place to secure that technology and make sure it's maintaining compliance. So these different complexity factors, whether they're industry specific or regional specific, they create this continuous challenge for organizations when they're looking at what is the assessment we're going to do. Is it relevant? Maybe it was relevant 5 or 6 years ago. Is it still relevant today? Is it updating with our needs as a business? And if we don't have this in a timely manner, what happens? So these are questions companies are asking, and this is where HITRUST is paying attention and doing our best to help serve some of these challenges. So I'll pass it back to you. Yeah.
Absolutely. These these complexity factors are kind of the external drivers that make us go down this path, and they create internal challenges, which we've tried to sort of summarize here. Obviously, this list isn't exhaustive, but these are the most common ones that we see. So I do want to spend a little time talking about each. The first one is really silos, right? I mean, I alluded to it earlier, but if you have started with a single framework and added more with the same team, same product, you probably don't deal with this as much. But if you're one of those companies that maybe you merged with a company, maybe you've had totally separate product offerings that are now trying to comply with the same thing. Maybe you've had, people in prior roles who managed things the way they wanted because they were just wearing multiple hats, and now you're trying to stand up dedicated teams and resources. There's a lot of silos that can crop up, and these aren't malicious, right? These are just natural challenges that we see when you have a large group of people trying to coordinate and collaborate across a lot of requirements. And so, addressing that silo is one of the things we'll talk about with the next piece, which is kind of the what of what we're doing. But hopefully that echoes a lot of your own sentiments that you may be seeing in these more complex organizations. We also see a ton of duplicative effort. So if you look at compliance in general, we'll just say information security, but it spans beyond that. But if you look at just information security and the standards built for information security, it's like a giant Venn diagram. They all overlap some, but not totally, right?
Yeah.
And so it's incredible how much time and effort you can put into gathering that one piece of evidence from that one control owner who's always busy, and being able to use that over and over. But a lot of times what happens is you go and you think you've got it figured out, you get that piece of evidence from them, and then that next auditor, or that next customer that's auditing you, or whoever it is you need to prove operational effectiveness to, comes in and asks for the same thing in a little bit of a different way. And you have to go back and get it again. And that's on top of our own duplicative efforts, right? The
Mhm.
internal assessments, the external assessments, the self-assessments, the risk discussions. I mean, there's things that just happen over and over because you're trying to, as the compliance team, be this conduit of communication and information exchange within your companies. And so there's some natural duplicative efforts you're not going to avoid. I mean, you've got to say the same thing a few times usually, especially if it's something new. Um, but there's ways to reduce this significantly, and frankly, it just comes down to data organization.
Yeah.
Um, the next thing is manual processes. I mean, I just alluded to the idea of manually gathering and collecting from control owners evidence you need to demonstrate operational effectiveness. Um, there's ways to automate the gathering of that evidence, but there's also ways to, uh, in sort of a workflow type manner, a workflow engine, automate the notification of the need for new evidence. And that's a big pain point. Excuse me. That's a big pain point we see a lot. Is people are saying, "Look, I know what needs to be done. I just don't have enough hours in the day. So how can I get some intelligent and doctrinally accurate automation and help there?" And then the last one is lack of visibility. So as top management, that's an ISO term, but I think it applies more generally speaking to any compliance team. Whoever is sort of where the buck stops can really begin to struggle to see the performance of all these various programs if they are not organized and communicated in a way. That fragmentation that we see across risk versus control gaps versus proactive R&D type projects, there's a lot of reactiveness that typically comes along with a lack of visibility, no matter how proactive you plan to be at those quarterly or annual meetings where you sit down and identify this pain point yet again. And so the question is, okay, well, these are certainly challenges, but are they worth addressing? And I would argue they are because of the impacts. So fines and penalties are very real, especially within the privacy realm and within healthcare. I mean, there are organizations with teeth that can fine you and
Yeah.
penalize you for not complying. There's lawsuits, sanctions. There's all kinds of things that can come your way. So very real material risk if on accident you miss things and don't comply and create operational gaps. There's also reputational risk. I mean, you may get that certificate, but if you've got certain glaring gaps or issues on, whatever the framework is, those can cause reputational risk. Another big one I see a lot of that there's no concrete, tangible evidence of it being a risk to your reputation is the slowness in responding to stakeholders, typically
Mhm.
clients. So I see this a lot. They have the answers, they have the data, but it's kind of like going to a fast food restaurant, right? The longer it takes them, the more you question whatever it is they're bringing you. And
Yeah.
so it's, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's a dynamic we all have to face. And with the rise of AI and automation and all of these things that are just giving us instantaneous value and answers, the SLAs there are just going to be reduced in order to avoid eroding that customer trust. But on the flip side, if you can address this proactively and be able to provide at a moment's notice answers to very detailed, non-Googleable compliance questions, that can skyrocket your reputation. And the last one is operational disruption. Sorry, I had to see on my screen there. Yeah, operational disruption. So again, you've got a lot of these control owners are very busy. They have a lot to do with their day job. They understand the need and the importance to comply with all these various frameworks, but it's no less disruptive to their day, right? They still have to stop what they're doing, totally shift gears, and now go talk to an auditor or provide evidence for something. And that can cause unacceptable delinquencies in innovation. And that's one of the things that being organized is going to help you internally as a compliance team manage your own reputation. Because,
Yes.
I talked about reputational risk externally, but there's also a lot of risk internally. You don't want to be seen as the team that's, the annoyance, right? We all have sort of lived that life a little bit because it's a necessity and a necessary evil in a lot of the control owners' minds sometimes. But if you can get out ahead of that and you can make this just a part of their day-to-day whirlwind of activities that gets baked in a very natural way to how they do business already, um, you begin to really again earn that confidence and trust and just general happiness from your internal stakeholders as well.
Yeah. And the one that really speaks to me is those duplicative efforts. We used to hear about audit fatigue all the time when I worked in my previous company. They would be like, you were just here last month or last week and you're here testing the same
Yeah.
thing again. Yeah, because that's the way compliance tends to work too often, and it's a problem. You are
Yeah.
not efficient, and you are just
Right.
retesting, and slowing people down. They have day jobs. Their job is not to just fulfill audit requirements and send you evidence.
Yeah. And as much as I would love for the assessor industry to be able to come up with a solution here, it simply can't. There are limitations because, for example, HITRUST has to have what HITRUST needs to
Mhm.
certify and validate HITRUST effectiveness with controls. SOC 2 has to have what it has to have to create that report. So I don't think you're ever going to see a world where all of the duplicative effort externally goes away, but the effort it takes internally to answer those questions more than once can be
Yeah,
very streamlined.
absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about this harmonization process. What does it mean to have this multi-framework GRC program? And if you paid attention to HITRUST in the past, you may have seen the slogan we used to use called "Assess once, report to many." What does that mean? Is that practical? Is that real? Is that something you can actually do? So to set the stage on the context, I'll start with compliance because that is something we've been talking about a little bit. HITRUST has compliance benefits. We help you with your regulatory environment. And with this whole assess once, report to many, it doesn't necessarily mean your one assessment is the only assessment you will ever do and that's it. But what it allows you to do is streamline the audit process. Because HITRUST, we have a living, breathing framework. We have this thing called the HITRUST CSF. That is our framework. I'll talk a little bit more about it as we advance through, but to give you a quick overview, the HITRUST CSF is constantly updated to make sure it's meeting your needs as a business. And if your compliance environment changes, if there's a new control introduced into HIPAA, for instance, if HIPAA has a security law change, well, you know what? We will update our framework and you will not have to go on government websites to research that. It makes it a lot cleaner for you as a business. And you can use our framework to map to different practices or to different authoritative sources, what we call them. I have a list later I'll talk to you guys about, but regulatory environment is a big one. And this allows for a tremendous increase to efficiency. When you talk about year-to-year assessment strategy, you can do one assessment, map in extra factors, and from there, your one assessment is now touching multiple reports that you may need to produce. So you're not testing the same place over and over and over. You're doing one control test. Maybe you're testing your access settings for your application. You do your access testing, and then you can use that to meet NIST, ISO, SOC, and others through your HITRUST assessment that you've scoped. So that's a common approach that we see. On top of regulation, we have third-party assurance, third-party due diligence. It is your goal as an organization, is your job as an organization, not just to protect your own applications, but protect your customers that are using them. And you may be working with other vendors and other customers that touch your data and you touch theirs. And you're only as strong as the weakest link. That's the mentality organizations need to have when it comes to data sharing and the security of that information. And vendor risk management or third-party assurance is a very common challenge that we hear at HITRUST. There are a lot of different reports companies will provide and send. Maybe there's questionnaires. Maybe there's SOC 2s of varying quality. Maybe there's an ISO report, a NIST report, a HITRUST report, a HIPAA compliance assessment. I could go on. If I'm trying to manage vendors and I have 6 or 7 different types of audits coming in with varying quality, the level of scrutiny I put on that and the level of time I'm spending reviewing these assessments is problematic and overwhelming in a lot of cases. So with something like HITRUST, what you could do in theory is if you have your company's doing HITRUST, you get a reliable report that's consistent in terms of the format. You have consistent scoring, a consistent report type that you can use to risk rank vendors one to the next. And if you're the vendor, if you're the one doing the HITRUST assessment, well, you can, in theory, kill that questionnaire. You have a report that's going to far exceed what a questionnaire is going to ask you to achieve. And if you're getting other report requests, you can, in most cases, send your HITRUST report. It's going to far exceed what would be tested in those other requirements. So you have this one assessment you can use multiple times to cover the business needs, whether you are the customer vetting vendors or whether you're the vendor that is being requested or pounded with different audit requests through the year. So a lot of value in having HITRUST incorporated into third-party due diligence. Expanding further, so we have security benefits. This is one of my favorite things to talk about at HITRUST. And with protecting data, there are assessments that you can do to test how well controls are working. But let's be honest, a lot of these control frameworks don't change far too often. They may sit stagnant for years, and you typically don't keep your technologies stagnant. We're evolving. We see companies introducing things like AI into their environment. We see companies increasing efficiencies, hiring new people, updating processes. And if you're still relying on an outdated framework or an outdated audit approach, you're introducing risks, whether you like that or not. The risks are going to evolve, and you need to find ways to secure the business, secure the information, and secure the systems you're relying on. HITRUST, we update our framework a few times a year. We typically update it 2 or 3 times each year. And the reason for that is we look at what controls need to be in place to protect your business. What threats are new, been introduced over time? Where were breaches happening? What were the attack strategies that were used? And what controls could have prevented a breach from happening or can detect a breach immediately to help reduce the loss that the business will face or the reputational hit that they'll deal with if they do experience a breach. And with HITRUST, we've been monitoring breach prevention success. And the statistic we have is over the last 3 years, 99.4% of HITRUST certified environments have not experienced a breach. It's not 100%, but it's 99.4. It's very close to that, and we're thrilled with that result. And this is from a framework. This is not a tool or technology you implement and it's just absolute security. This is a framework of controls that you put in place, and it's making sure you are addressing the threats, the evolving threat landscape, and also meeting compliance objectives. So that's where a lot of the benefits that that come to driving. Why should I do HITRUST? Yes, you get the compliance benefits. Yes, you can use this report multiple times, but also in general, your security is shown to improve, and that's a tremendous benefit. So if you're the CISO of an organization and it's your job to maintain strong security and protect the assets, this is a great option to look at and explore. So security is a huge thing that HITRUST focuses on. And then lastly, sales and business development. The reality is a lot of contracts nowadays have a HITRUST certification tied to them. There is a cost of not having HITRUST, and it's a ticket to the conversation for a lot of organizations. I'll say especially in healthcare. We attend multiple conferences each year at HITRUST, and what I hear time and time again is these companies will achieve a HITRUST certification, and now they're able to sell to big healthcare providers, or their technology is now widely accepted in the industry because they have a trusted, reliable report that they can use to appeal to the marketplace. And there's even companies out there that are requiring vendors of all magnitude, whether they're small or large, to produce a HITRUST assessment as a part of that third-party risk management process. So overall, compliance benefits, third-party risk management benefits, security benefits, and dollars, straight up sales and business development dollars associated with having HITRUST. Those are just some of the areas you'll see HITRUST can help with at your organization. So I'll talk a little bit about the portfolio itself. We've said having a HITRUST certification. What are my options? What does that mean? E1, I1, R2. You'll see that on the left side of the screen. These are the 3 core assessment types that HITRUST can produce for an organization. And the way I like to think of it for simplicity purposes, E is the easy one, it's the small. I is the intermediate, it's the medium. And R is the more rigorous, it's the large. So small, medium, large, E, I, R. These are the 3 assessment types that you can have. All of them are certifiable, and each of these is something that will get sent to HITRUST for review. At HITRUST, we review each and every assessment for quality purposes, and then we issue out that report and certification. To achieve one of these assessments, you have to work with what we call external assessors. These are organizations like Risk360 that will come in and test the controls and send those results over to HITRUST for us to review and accredit on and send out the certification to. The E1 right now is the most popular starting point for companies because it's the smallest assessment. It's 44 controls in size. The nice thing is with the E, all 44 controls are going to be baked into every single I1 assessment. So it's a great starting point. That's what most companies will do year one. And then year two, if you want to advance your journey and get more security benefits, go to that I1 assessment in year two. Similarly, all of the I1 controls are baked into every single R2. So EIR, it makes for a traversable step-by-step approach where companies may start with E1 in year one, I1 year two, R2 year three is a very common strategy that we'll see. Not to overuse the phrase boil the ocean, but that's the mentality here is you don't want to boil the ocean in some cases. If HITRUST is something new for your business, taking it in gradual steps can be a benefit. So the E1, I1, R2 are the three assessment types we offer. In the middle, you'll see AI. This is something relatively new at HITRUST. We've introduced a new AI security assessment option that can be stacked onto any of those three assessments on the left. So you can do an E1 plus AI security, an I1 plus AI security. And this is an extra certification you can achieve as a business, whether you are the ones leveraging AI or providing a platform of AI. The word AI is important to your business, this is another way that we can help you with security and put those prescriptive controls in place to get you a certification on it. This launched in December, and we're seeing this more and more commonly being stacked on top of assessments. So definitely something to be aware of and to ask your assessor about if you're curious what that option looks like. And then lastly, to finalize the full value add, you'll see these different authoritative sources, what we call them. So PHIPAA, HIPAA, NIST are three examples. You can stack these standards on top of other assessments, and it gets you extra value, extra reporting available on your assessment. So if you do an E1 and you need to be HIPAA compliant, you can add the HIPAA controls into your HITRUST assessment. So now you have a certification on the E1, and you also have a report that covers HIPAA compliance testing. So you can use that to report out and demonstrate that you've maintained compliance with different standards and requirements of your business. So a little bit of HITRUST 101 there for anyone that's new. All this is done through our framework and through our approach.
Yeah, I gotta just say how much I like the E1. It's great. I mean, because a lot of companies it's such a big bite to get that first certification or framework in place, and I've seen a lot of people able to take that E1, which is a little bit more of a bite-sized chunk. It's very good controls. They're still certainly comprehensive across those high-risk categories, but it's just you're not diving straight into a 400 control assessment, because that's literally stuff I've seen drive employees away. It's very very risky. So
yeah, HITRUST, when I first joined, we only had one option. It was the R2. And right. For anyone that's curious, how big is the R2? The average right now is about 380 controls. It can get down to 250 if you simplify the scope a bit, but 250 controls is still a big effort for an organization. The E1, it's 44 controls, and the I1's 182. So definitely E1 is a very valuable starting point, and you still get that 99.4% breach prevention rate that factors into that statistic. So it still works. These controls are extremely relevant. And then so lastly, we're talking about the framework, the HITRUST CSF itself. So you'll see here it's got 2,500 controls. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is testing all 2,500 controls, but that just shows how broad the HITRUST framework has coverage. And on the left, you'll see 60 plus standards harmonized. That's where these 2,500 controls come into play. We look at popular standards, regulations, commonly used frameworks, and we map to those through our HITRUST CSF. That way you can leverage this into your HITRUST assessment, map these controls, and it'll deduplicate the testing that's required for you. So the value is, say you need to be PCI compliant or GDPR compliant and you're doing a HITRUST R2 assessment. You can add those sources to your assessment scope. You check the box when you're in our platform, it pulls in extra controls and it deduplicates them. So you're not going to be testing the same password 3 or 4 different times. And then from there, you can sort and filter and report out. So it can help you if you have to submit a PCI assessment or a GDPR assessment, something like that. You can filter and extract the results. So it really streamlines the compliance. And the nice thing about our framework is we put it into very prescriptive language. So we tell you exactly how to implement these controls, what needs to be tested. To give an analogy, a framework might say you need to go to the store and buy a glass of milk or buy a bottle of milk. But what does that mean? What store do I go to? What type of milk am I purchasing? Or HITRUST will come in and will say you need to go to the Walmart, it's on this street, go to aisle 3, it's the dairy section, and you're going to buy a gallon of 2%. There's still a little bit of flexibility there, but we're way more prescriptive. And if you have our gallon of milk versus the other option, you have a lot more confidence that you've done this the right way with our approach, because we're giving you the prescriptive language in terms of what needs to be done. So we're not buying milk with HITRUST, but we are testing controls and improving security. So with our language, it's designed to be very clear what needs to be done to meet different compliance standards and regulations. So there's no second guessing. So that's how our framework works. And this is why we have multiple versions come out each year if a regulation changes. So recently in December, HIPAA announced there were going to be some changes. Well, with that, we've mapped the changes in. So if anyone wants to be compliant with the latest version of HIPAA, HITRUST has done that for you. Just scope using our latest version of the framework and you're good to go. Similarly, if a new popular compliance standard comes out that everyone's required to introduce, GDPR is a good example that came out a few years ago. It kind of hit the world by storm. What did that mean? We put that into prescriptive language so organizations know what needs to be done. So that's where our framework works. You can map these sources in, they're optional, and it's cyber threat adaptive. So if there's a new threat that emerges, we will introduce that into our core set of controls as well. So you might see an E1 new control introduced in the next 4 or 5 years. If there's a new popular threat strategy and we need a control to protect against that, that's where HITRUST is helping you look at security and compliance. So it takes a lot of that guesswork out and gives you that extra level of assurance that you've done the right approach for that. Back to you, Sawyer.
All right. Yeah, I think the one thing I wanted to add here is, you talked about the cyber threats being baked in. I think it's easy to glaze over that, but that is such a big deal because there's so many frameworks that have very legalistic language in them in terms of how the controls are intended to operate, but they sort of leave it to you to do the threat analysis and factor that into your control set. They may, meet every 3 or 4 years and try to do some of that just as a gut check, but you guys go a lot further with that, and it's evidenced by, like you mentioned, the specificity of the controls that we see.
Yeah.
So cool. So yeah, the last piece of the presentation here is around the how. So we've talked about kind of the why you should care about this problem, why it is maybe costing you more than you realize. We talked about the what, this idea of HITRUST being a way to address many of these concerns by starting with that framework. But I want to also get into the how because, we all have clients that want different things. Like I mentioned, you may have different verticals within your own business that one, is more appropriate for HITRUST, one's more appropriate for a different framework, or maybe they all have to be under all the umbrellas. So the question is, how do I make sense of all this? And I want to give you a little bit of a cheat sheet. If you're going to take one screenshot, I would recommend taking this because to me, these are this, you could argue this is like kind of spelled out as the why, but these are symptoms of a good stack for managing GRC. So if you can't at a moment's notice produce a holistic view of your risk posture, if you can't see clearly the risk statuses, if you can't track and report your compliance in real time as people ask you, not give me a week and I'll get back to you, if you can't very quickly look at a core business process and see how that spiders out into all of the other frameworks that it addresses, then I would encourage you to take a step back and question your investments here and maybe lack of investment, because there are some really great tools out there. I'm going to talk about Risk 360s, which is called Full Circle, but I mean there's a lot of tools out there. So if you find yourself doing a lot of really manual things and you're reactive and you're constantly having to ask for time to do the things that people are asking you to do and show the things you're trying to show, really reevaluate your tool stack because there's some great stuff out there. So I want to talk about Full Circle and how it's complementary to the HITRUST framework. So HITRUST is it's one of the few that I refer to as like a backbone framework. And what I mean is, if you're going to do multiple standards, you're going to do SOC 2 and HITRUST and ISO and PCI and all these others, you pretty much, if you're going to harmonize, you pretty much have to decide for yourself which of those you'll start with, because it will be the backbone that you sort of hang all the rest of the stuff off of. HITRUST is a great option because of the specificity. One of the challenges you face when you're actually trying to harmonize is catering to the most restrictive evidence requests that you need to provide. I'll give you a good example: vulnerability scanning. Let's say that you just have a basic SOC 2 type 2 report with a somewhat templated control set you get from your auditor. It's going to say something to the effect of maybe quarterly or twice a year, you're going to run some vulnerability scans and remediate maybe critical and serious issues within an SLA, a defined time period. But once you start tacking on additional frameworks, that requirement begins to get ratcheted down. And then it also begins to get scoped down depending on what it is you're wanting to do. And that complexity quickly multiplies across many other types of controls. So, what our tool does, our tool is framework agnostic. Our tool is intended to be a compliance database, essentially, where whatever you've decided to do and however you've decided to run your program, we have the features and the backend data architecture to allow you to create that web of relationships and mappings between your frameworks, your evidence, and your sort of custom design controls that you've built. So I love HITRUST as a backbone framework because a lot of times you're 80% there on most of the other frameworks the second you stand up HITRUST. And so where we come into play is you can add in frameworks within Full Circle, and those already have a lot of the same mappings. We can even ingest all the mappings from the HITRUST platform and all the things you have set up there. And what we're doing is we're giving you a way to simply see all of the data in a great place and manage the collection and the ongoing monitoring of that program. So that's that workflow engine I mentioned. We have something we call it periodicity, but you can set your periodicity for all of your different evidence requests. Let's say you have that quarterly scan or a quarterly access review. You can configure that evidence request, which is now mapped to all of your frameworks, and it's rooted in that backbone framework you've chosen, to notify that control owner on a quarterly basis. Hey, I need a new copy of this. I need some fresh evidence for you here. Um, and on top of it, I mean, some compliance teams I've seen are really truly doing it all. They're going out and gathering the evidence themselves. But the bigger you get, the less likely that is. And so what you as a compliance team needs is an ability to see in a dashboard view where you sit against all these different statuses of evidence, and really what your snapshot point in time audit readiness is. And so, I could go on for days about all the features we've built, and I would love to show anyone that wants to see it a demo. But suffice to say, at the end of the day, we've thought through this problem because we were consultants and auditors and implementers of frameworks first. We built this tool for ourselves 7 years ago, and we did it because we wanted we couldn't find anything that was better, so we decided to build it ourselves. It's since turned into a full-blown platform, and it serves our needs as consultants and advisors and auditors. But if you have your own team, you don't need consultants like us. You can benefit from the exact same tools. So we're very complementary to HITRUST, and this idea of sort of starting with this backbone framework and then seeing what's left for the rest of them. We can help you manage that on an ongoing basis within the tool pretty easily. If you care to read into it, we've got a few case studies of clients that have really realized a lot of the benefits that the feature set brings. These two, you can see there's QR codes there. So you could scan those to get access to these resources. There's also links, but you can read about a lot of specifics around what they actually saw as benefit by creating this harmonized approach to all of their programs and having this tool. The other thing I'll mention is we have a really capable, detailed ability to slice and dice your data. So let's say that you are HITRUST certified. When it comes time for your HITRUST audit, and you're working with the assessor, we have the ability to, for instance, say, I want to pull everything that's HITRUST related out, mapped back to HITRUST controls. So you can generate an audit package that is just directly translated over to exactly what HITRUST needs to see to give their assurance that you are in fact compliant with the controls there. So a lot of really nifty things. Again, you can you can bet that these things are going to bring efficiency because we desire efficiency as a consulting firm, but we also do not compromise on quality. So I encourage you to read these case studies and check it out. We'll go to the last slide here, sort of talk about unified offering, if you will. So again, think about HITRUST as one of these backbone frameworks. If you're especially if you're dealing with healthcare related data, it's a fantastic place to begin this journey. It's also a great way to mature your maybe um, you know traditional program, right? If your business is making moves, you're doing things, you're starting to see these contractual requirements for HITRUST. It's a great opportunity to take a step back and rethink how you've got all of your controls and evidence mapped together. And then again, we're framework agnostic, so all of the hard legwork that HITRUST has done to create harmonized control sets mapped out to all these other frameworks is great. We can just ingest this stuff directly into the platform and give you exactly the tools you need to manage that on a year-round basis, kind of creating this always-on compliance within your business. You want to add anything here?
I think you nailed it. I mean, HITRUST will come in and we'll give you the prescriptive controls. We'll tell you what you need to test to maintain compliance with XYZ. But we are not the only company that you can work with. You need to work with an assessor that gets it. And it's clear that with your approach, you've designed a technology and a strategy that your customers can benefit from. So it's efficient and it's scalable, and that's something that we definitely would want to see our customers benefiting from. So when you
Yeah.
consider, should I look at HITRUST? Talk to Risk 360, see if that's something they can help you with, because I'm sure they've already identified some efficiencies with your current audit strategy, or work with a similar customer they've done that for. And then if you're interested in what HITRUST has to offer, feel free to reach out to me as well and loop me into those conversations. I'm happy to talk about where we're headed, what we're doing now, and some of those extra benefits that come with having that HITRUST certification.
Yeah, one of the last unique things I think about the relationship here is a lot of external firms that are issuing opinions or certification decisions. They have, they're not able to give you a lot of helpful stuff. They just kind of point you towards your internal team, your external partners. But that's not the case with HITRUST. HITRUST, I think, understands business and understands the need to have people to contact. So, like, that
Yeah.
HITRUST customer support is great because you can have an internal party like us that's helping to drive the assessment and to actually look at the evidence and provide our intake or our input on things, but you can also turn right around and talk to HITRUST as well. And it's so
Mhm.
nice to be able to sort of consult the rule book and talk to the players at the same time. I think it makes for a great client experience. So wanted to highlight that.
I'm glad you said that, because that's been a goal. We've been trying to take the curtain away, and open up the conversation flow. So every
Yeah.
customer that works with HITRUST, you'll have a representative that you can ask any and all questions to. We train everyone nowadays to be technical, so they can help you with looking at these strategies and
Yeah.
understanding what's a good approach to this. And once you've done your audit, once you've sent over the results through Risk 360, we put a quality check on everything. We are looking at, was the assessment done completely? Do we agree with the results? And then you get that report directly from us. You get that extra benefit that you have a reliable report, that you've done with quality. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing this continue to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a question come through that said, "How do you get started with harmonization efforts?" I think from my side of things, I mean, we have done a ton of mapping work ourselves, and like a lot of our customers that are in need of harmonization have built to some degree their own sort of common control framework.
Mhm.
um, and it's something that they need help making sense of, because now they're trying to bake in other frameworks and it's just not jiving. They're not sure what the right choices are. So one of the things we offer is, look, if you need someone to roll their sleeves up and put in the elbow grease to just do this, spend the 30, 40, whatever hours it takes to map these things together and make sure it's right, we do that. We actually do that as a part of the implementation of our software. That's something that I think is fairly rare with GRC offerings, because a lot of them point to their partners and say work with them, or they may give you some very templated things. But we want this to be as nuanced and custom for you as you want it to be for yourself, and we support you in that and do the actual work. We're like the lawn company that will actually pull up the weeds for you. So there's not many of those out
Those are
there.
rare.
Yeah.
We used that last week.
Yeah. Cool. Do you want to just cover from the HITRUST side, like if you guys have a client come to you or a prospect that says, "Hey, we got a couple of obligations here looking at HITRUST. how do I make sure I'm not doing the same thing over and over for all these frameworks? How would you guys respond to that?
Yeah, so from our side, everything lives and breathes within a platform called MyCSF. That's what all of our customers will leverage, and we have a full team of trained people that can walk you through how to use that tool from a framework standpoint to incorporate into your business. And the way it'll work is we can help you decide which assessment makes sense for you, whether it's E1, I1, or R2. We'll help you understand what are the extra compliance benefits of each one, because R2 has the full flexibility. E1 and I1 are more security focused reports, but they do have some compliance options like HIPAA, BHIPAA, NIST as part of that. But overall, from a getting started, the goal for you, if you're thinking about HITRUST, is decide which report makes sense and what's the scope of that report. What are the controls that I need to test? That's where we will help you. And then that's where you need an assessor to come in and test it. And you need to have evidence that can be used. And that's where Risk 360 will come in with their full circle approach to demonstrate, okay, here's the controls. We'll help you get these in place. We'll help you with any policies you need, any implementation needs to be done. We'll look at what you've already done from other audits in the past, because most companies have done something before they start HITRUST. They'll help you understand leverage what's been in place and where the gaps are, and they'll address those gaps, find that delta, and then from there, test the control, send them to HITRUST. We'll review it and issue out the report. So it's very much a partnership type of approach. With HITRUST, we'll provide our framework, and they'll provide they'll sit in the car with you and drive you there. Kind of we're the mapping. They're the wingman in the process to help you get there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Awesome. Cool. That was the only question I saw. Yeah, I encourage you all to reach out to myself and Matt for any questions you have. I think we both share a passion for just wanting to move the industry forward and help people do things right. I mean,
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough out there to comply with all this stuff and not cut those corners that seem so tempting. But I think that you're doing right by your business, as a fiduciary of that data by trying to do stuff right. And I think we both share that same passion. So I encourage you to reach out to us, interact with us on social media. I've got a bunch of YouTube videos, man. I know you guys have a ton of content out there. But yeah, I just want to say thanks for your time.
Yes, thank everyone for joining in today. And if any questions that you forgot to ask, feel free to reach out to our groups. We'll be happy to help you out from here. Thanks again.